Hello, I'm Caroline Collins from Film Pittsburgh. Welcome to the Film Pittsburgh Fall Festival, and welcome to this very special interview with the creators of Code of the Freaks. Hi, everyone. Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves and say what your role is in the film, and take myself out a little bit, and we'll start with Salome.
My name is Salome Chasnoff, and I'm the director of the film.
Perfect. Lawrence?
Hi, I'm Lawrence Carter-Long, and I was emotional support and interviewee.
Terrific. Carrie?
Hi, my name is Carrie Sandahl, and I was one of the writer, producers, and an interviewee.
Terrific. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. I am delighted to talk to you guys because I found this film just absolutely fascinating, and it really challenged a lot of my preconceptions, and I think a lot of just the general public's preconceptions about what we accept when it comes to representation in film. So I really am curious to know how it got started. And I feel like a lot of things start with the writer. So Carrie, I'm going to start with you and ask you how this film came about.
Well, I was invited to participate by Salome and our good friend Susan Nussbaum. And was it 2009, 2010?
I think it was 2000. Yes. Well, Susan and I started around 2008.
Yeah, so how about you tell the origin and then I can add in.
Okay, yeah, well, Susan, who was the one that came up with the idea and also a writer and producer as well, an interviewee, she was very interested in talking to diverse audiences, both people with disabilities and people without, regarding the impact of Hollywood films in their lives. When she became disabled as a young woman, she was very disturbed by the messaging that she was noticing in mainstream media, and it was affecting how she thought of herself and her situation, as well as how other people saw her. So we started doing these salons in a variety of settings in Chicago, community-based settings. And I think that's when Carrie entered the picture. So take it away.
Yeah. So I teach a class at the University of Illinois at Chicago called Disability in American Film. And I'm a disabled theater artist. So I had experienced myself what in the theater, not as much in film, but how disability always is signifying. So whenever a disabled person comes on stage, there is a meaning attached to it. The disability has to be part of the plot. So as a young disabled actor, I was told that I wasn't going to get work because there weren't very many roles for young disabled women. And if I were to play a non-disabled character, it would confuse the audience if it weren't explained in the plot.
Wow.
So I saw this play out. I started noticing patterns. I was taking a lot of feminist courses, and I thought, well, disability needs to be thought of critically, just as we're thinking critically about race and gender, sexuality. So that got me kind of started on this path. And so when I came to UIC and had the opportunity to work with Susan and Salome, I was excited to kind of blend what I was doing in class with this larger project that we would eventually get to share with a general audience.
So just to give a little background, because it feeds into what the film ended up looking like, is we would organize clips of movies around themes like disabled or blind men and women, cure, kill, institutionalize, things like that. And we would show just one series of clips and have an audience discussion and film the discussion. And it was a pretty amazing experience. We discovered that there was a lot of passion, a lot of all kinds of emotions around the information that we were presenting, and people wanted to learn more.
Yeah, it really uncovers so many things that I think, as I mentioned earlier, people don't seem to think about, and we take a lot of it for granted. But to have that critical discussion of it, I think, did you find that the audience was people living with disabilities? Was it people without disabilities? Was it a mix? And did they respond differently?
It was totally a mix.
Yeah.
And there were student audiences, there were community audiences. I would say people with disabilities tended to be angrier when they began to critique movies that, a lot of people were angry, but for different reasons. People without disabilities were angry because we were destroying the myth of their favorite film, the film they'd seen 100 times, the film they watched with their grandmother or whatever. People with disabilities were enraged because they got a clearer picture of how they were being, people like them were being represented, which didn't reflect their reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, we heard lots of stories from people's everyday lives and how the films affected the way they saw themselves. I think that story that Teki Lomnicki tells about, being given the sense that she would be able to walk one day, and just the amount of time and energy and effort that we put into dealing with these tropes in our everyday lives is just to hear the whole community talking about the various ways that these films affected their lives was just a mosaic. And we didn't always agree with what people said. Sometimes we would hear things and be really puzzled by different people's reactions.
Yeah. I guess that just goes to human nature and how we all, understand and feel things differently.
Well, one more point I'd like to bring up.
Yeah.
People coming together as audience developed or created a community, which is different from the way people usually watch movies, which is alone. So having that communal conversation and the emotional feedback was very powerful. And I think it enabled people to move farther in their critiques, in their insights, than they might have alone on the couch, for example.
Sure.
And I think that our experience of the power of disability community and wanting to recreate that in the film was reinforced by these salon experiences.
And Lawrence, you were part of that community in the film. Can you explain how you came to the project and how you contributed?
Sure. I had a film series in New York City starting around 2006 that was called This. And it talks about that process. Salome really pointed out, we would the tagline was no handkerchief necessary, no heroism required. So every film that we showed was about disability, but it was counter programming. It was sex and drugs and rock and roll. And so we started out, we had about 25-30% of the audience was disabled, and the rest of the folks didn't in the surveys that we did. And people kept showing up. It was a 6-month experiment that lasted 4 years. And it was really because people were eager for something else. They were eager to see something break the mold, something unexpected, something different. And that was really sort of fertile ground for me. I've always been a film nerd, and I work in media and communications and advocacy and in the nonprofit world. And it's a way to kind of reach hearts and minds, film that is, that you can't often do. You can't bring a dance performance into your living room, except now maybe via Zoom.
Yeah, true.
Right? And so it sort of changes that relationship, right? When you're surrounded by a group of people, you're processing, especially when you do a talk back like we're doing now.
Yeah.
You're processing what you just saw through the eyes and the ears and the experiences of somebody sitting across the aisle whom you never would have met before, you never would have been in the same room with before, and that creates a learning environment. And it was from that environment that I, with Alliance for Inclusion in the Arts in New York, said everybody's winning awards for playing disabled people. And so I went to Turner Classic Movies and said, why don't we do a spotlight on disability in film? And it was part of that process, watching 237 films to decide the 20 we could show as part of their on-air festival, that I was able to kind of combine that advocacy and my love of film and my love of cinema, that I was able to contribute and bring to this fantastic project, and really help shine a spotlight on it the way that Salome and Carrie and Susan have done.
Yeah, you truly have. Salome, is that how you found Lawrence was through his film presentation?
Well, Susan and Carrie had a previous relationship with Lawrence,
Yeah.
and introduced me.
And
Troublemakers,
this just reminds me when
troublemakers get together.
yes, we do. It's dangerous. When I first met Lawrence, it was at a film festival. The first conversation I had with you was at a disability film festival. I think one of the very first in 2006, then Chicago.
That's right.
And we had conversations, and you started talking. I was like, I have to know that guy.
Huh.
He's hilarious, and he's so smart. And that's, I think, a lot of how disability community forms. We find each other and build community.
Yeah, that really comes through in the film, that sense of community and how people really, seek each other out, I think, to talk about these films. It is interesting, Lawrence, that you mentioned the Oscar, because that's kind of a common knowledge that if you play someone with a disability, you're going to win an Oscar. And how does that, do you think, how has that impacted the way we've all accepted disability representation in film? Salome, what do you think?
I think the Hollywood is very interested in the hero's journey. And that goes for, obviously the plot of the movie, but it also kind of in some way, consciously or unconsciously, reflects upon the actor as well. So we kind of like to see these people transform themselves into an extreme of some sort. And that is a mark of great acting, because it's cheap. It's low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a big piece of it. I think the obsession, the attachment with the hero's journey is a big problem in film that really keeps it from growing and developing and becoming as smart as it could be.
Interesting. Well, now there's a whole new, it's not new, brand new, but a different presentation of media in social media. Has that impacted, do you think, the way disabilities are represented? And if so, how? Carrie, what do you think? You shook your head.
Yeah, just it's been absolutely revolutionary, the change. When I first started as a young theater student, I really wasn't only. I started in school due to changes in social policy that allowed disabled children to be educated alongside their non-disabled peers, but I didn't really have disabled peers either until I went to graduate school, and none of them were in theater, so I was an only for the longest time. And when I started to do research in this area, there was nothing written. There were a handful of things written by psychologists, some historian, maybe a little bit in literature, but it was all around stereotypes. So those of us who were disabled artists and academics, we started to find each other and started to collaborate with one another. And then the scholarship started to come. And then social media started happening and things exploded. Now younger generations, they're taking the bulls by the horns. They're making their own work. And one of the things I'm so excited about with Code of the Freaks that I hope other educators find is that if you show Code of the Freaks, we kind of lay it all out. We lay out what the whole terrain is so that you can move on to other things that are probably more interesting. So now when I show Code of the Freaks at the beginning of my film class, I spend almost the rest of the semester talking about work coming from the disability community. And that is not in Hollywood. Documentaries, social media, web series. There's so much going on now that just did not exist at all. It didn't exist just off of social media. It just didn't exist. So right now it's like I've heard even people in the disability community saying there's an oversaturation. There's so much because we're used to seeing everything.
Yeah.
I feel like there was a time when I had every single disability documentary on one sheet of paper that I would hand out as a resource. You can't do that anymore. Like there's so much, and we had this feeling like we could get our hands around the movement. It's like the genie's out of the bottle. It's fantastic. And eventually we'll work our way up to Hollywood. I mean, Lawrence has a film coming out.
What was that, Carrie? I'm sorry.
Oh, I said Lawrence has a film coming out that I think is in this genre of disabled people taking control of the camera and the behind and in front of the camera.
Yeah, I was in 2 films this year, Code of the Freaks, of course, and the other is a narrative musical, a thing called Best Summer Ever, where about 70%, 65-70% of the crew and the cast is disabled. Wow. And it's a high school musical in like Footloose or Grease. But even though you've got all these characters, these individuals who have disabilities, why their origin story, that hero's journey that Salome talked about, is never discussed. It's never talked about. So there may be, I'm very curious to see what happens when Best Summer Ever hits cinemas and people are actually able to watch it, because there'll probably be, because of the programming and the conditioning that people have, there are going to be a few minutes, the first 5 minutes are going to be going, what the heck is going on? Why are all these people running around? And then hopefully they'll sort of settle into that ecosystem, you know, and move to the beat. And it'll be it's a lot of fun. It shows that community spirit that you're talking about, but it changes, you know, it breaks all the rules. And I'll be really curious to see, you know, how audiences receive it and where, you know, what the next iteration is beyond that. So yeah, that's the evolution that Carrie's been talking about. You know, things can, you don't, one of the things, because media works what I do when I'm not making movies, and you know, social media breaks down those barriers. If you get something right, somebody can go to you directly and say, hey, great, good job. Likewise, if you screw it up, the gatekeepers aren't there, right, to keep you secluded and away from your critics. And so it's really kind of democratized in some ways, the community finally being able to have a say in how we're represented in a way that we've never really had before.
So do you see a change coming? Do you think this is a tidal wave that will make real change in film and television?
Sadly, I don't think so.
Well,
I think hindsight will give us that answer. Yeah. I mean, there does seem to be some movement, particularly in television, I would say, and some documentary. Very little. Some really outstanding examples, but very few, unfortunately, in mainstream film. But I think maybe in 5 or 10 years, we'll be able to tell you better.
Yeah,
and I think I'm gonna respectfully disagree. I think the genie is out of the bottle, and that you know, those tried and true tropes, those stereotypes are a lot of things. They're ingrained, but they're also really boring at this point. You know, there's the sort of sense that I've seen that same character 100 times, and I think audiences are really hungry for something different. They just don't know it yet because they haven't been exposed to it. So as they get more exposed to it and they get that different slant, that different take, they're really hungry and eager for it. So I just hope that disabled creatives get a chance to make more movies so that we get to see different stories. Yeah. I think it's going that direction. I don't think you can go back.
I hope so. I mean, I talked about the genie out of the ball. That's kind of in social media and alternative forms. But in terms of Hollywood, I think it's going to really take a while. Because being in higher ed, we just don't have the students getting through the training programs. We have very few trained disabled actors. Film schools are notoriously ableist. It's built right into the curriculum and the kind of requirements they have, the kind of schedules one needs to keep, the way that casting directors work. There's a whole industry-wide change that needs to happen. So my prediction is we're going to be creating so much material from the outside. Eventually, it's going to become so interesting it'll make its way in. But I think it's going to take, sadly, I think another 20 years. But there's going to be so many opportunities outside of Hollywood that people have choices, and they'll maybe vote with their feet, I guess, and they'll all
their dollars. Sure.
I hope so.
What you buy a ticket to, right? That's going to make a huge difference.
So prove me wrong. I hope, please, audience, prove me wrong.
I agree with both of you. I agree with both of you.
Yeah, very diplomatic. Spoken like a true director. Well, I know it has absolutely changed my perspective, and I'm sure the same can be said for everyone else who will get to see this film, who has seen the film, and will get to see it throughout the rest of the festival. So we are so grateful to you all for sharing this with us, and just so happy to be able to share this story because it was fantastic. And thank you all very much for joining me today from your respective homes. I appreciate you coming together virtually with us for this.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Honored to take part.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoy the rest of the festival.